Hello everyone, welcome to week 4. I started with chapter 9 and specifically started with emergency preparedness, the things we do to get ready in case an extreme event such as a hurricane hits us. This readiness helps minimize the impact of the extreme event. Um, and the primary goal of emergency response is to make sure not only the public are safe, but also the emergency responders are safe. And I think sometimes we tend to forget the emergency responders are essentially putting their life in more danger to help the public. And emergency responders must improvise when responding to emergencies. And Chapter 9 describes 3 different forms of improvisation. The first is reproductive improvisation. And in this, we're using substitution as a response if something is not working correctly, which makes sure the objective of the emergency response still happens. So Chapter 9 used the example of um, a siren not working, so then police go door to door to inform people of what's going on. The next is adaptive improvisation. In this one, we're changing normal routines or contingency plans to make sure the emergency responses goal is reached. Um, and they made it a point to say that it's just a change, but it's not an improvement. The next is creative improvisation, creating a completely new course of action to respond to a disaster that has come without warning. And preparedness, they, they say, is best to be seen as a process where constant analysis and plan development are done. Also, individual and team performance skills can occur through training, drills, and exercises. And my muddy point for this week is I started to get confused between all the organizational structures talked about. I understand that the authors want to explain each program and how it has changed over time, but it gets to be too information, especially since most of us are just now being introduced to these organizations. And I use the example how they talked about the Metropolitan Strike Team program turned into the Metropolitan Medical Response System. Um, and I understand why they did that because they're trying to explain where it came from, but it starts to get confusing for me especially. And I just rather that they would talk about the current organization and not every organization that ever existed. So for the first article, which was the roles of children and youth in communicating disaster risk, which was by Mitchell, Haynes, Hall, Chung, and Oven. I never heard someone with the last name Oven. Um, Authors believe that when children are excluded from disaster planning, it threatens their safety when a disaster hits. They say a lot of current research assumes that children are passive victims and don't have a role to play in communicating risk. Um, they say encouraging children to become involved in risk reduction measures is actually part of their rights as children. And they listed a few different organizations and such. Um, and then they said through studies in El Salvador and New Orleans, the authors they concluded that children and youth show a unique role in communicating risk information and shows that they aren't just passive victims, as a lot of the research today portrays them. Um, for the last article, Mitigation and Response Planning in a Bioterrorist Attack, which was by Henry Fisher, he finds that through his study that many victims and survivors are likely to act in a way not expected by the media and emergency organizations. He believes they are more likely to be rational and start search and rescue activities. He also says some victims and survivors will hesitate, and sometimes they will fail to evacuate or resist quarantine. He also believes the media does help by informing the public of needed information of how to respond to the attack, but can also produce fiction that may increase panic, looting, and incapacitating emotional shock. And he also says, he also finds that officials may hesitate to announce an attack. An attack may happen because they fear it will incite panic and other behaviors such as looting. So my discussion question for this week is, after reading this week's readings, how would you personally prepare for a natural disaster? Also, do you have any suggestions as to what others could do to prepare if they have children in their households? Well, thank you for watching my video, and I'll see you next week.